Folks, it's your main man E, and I'm here with Emmy. Emmy is a young dog that, like so many dogs, became reactive to the point where it almost seemed aggressive. I mean, when she first got out of the car here and the person holding the camera went up to greet her, she jumped up. It was pretty scary. Yes. Yes. You could see now she's real chill. She's super calm. She's engaged with me. Yes. She's barked at me before, folks. Within the first, day here, she had some moments where she got spooked. So how is it, guys, that this nice, very pettable, lovable dog became reactive? How is it that this dog that's super sweet, yes, gets to the point where it's making people uncomfortable and is doing things that lend us to think, hey, is this dog aggressive, or could this be a liability, perhaps? Yes. So I wanted to talk to you guys about what are some things people unintentionally, inadvertently do that can actually create reactivity in their dog. One of the first things that I see happening, and it's very common, is there's a tendency to choke up on the leash, to tighten the leash, to hold the dog's collar, and to restrain the dog when they're frustrated. Okay? And although that can be great for temporarily controlling the dog, like, hey, you're about to run into the road, I have to grab your collar and hold you. When we do this over and over and over again, the dog starts learning that when they lunge at something, there's something that's going to catch them. The leash, me grabbing the collar, and it actually has the opposite effect that we think. The dog starts lunging stronger because they are trying to break away from the leash, they're trying to break away from our hand, and they're going to continue to try to get over to that thing. It's almost like if I was doing push-ups, and then you put a weight on my back, I'm just going to do a harder push-up. So when the dog's going that way and I start pulling backwards and the dog doesn't actually turn back to me and I keep pulling backwards, I create a dog that is very frustrated and convinced that if they keep lunging harder and harder in that direction, perhaps, maybe one day, I'll let them go and they'll get to go up to whatever they want. The second thing I see, which is maybe going to be counterintuitive, is people aren't using food enough with the dog when the dog's afraid. Anytime we see that the dog is afraid, we should test the dog and see, is this dog willing to take food? If they're not willing to take food, the potential to get them to meet somebody new or to get comfortable in a new environment is less likely. The only real option, if they're not willing to take food, is to essentially force them to do what we're telling them to do. And although that's fine, especially later in training, we have to get to the dog to the point of saying, hey, you have to do this, even though you're not going to take food. I got to cut your toenails, buddy. Early on in training, or before a dog's fully trained, it's super important that we don't continuously put them in situations when they're not taking food, because what can happen is they can start to think, hey, is he pulling out food? Oh my God, something scary is going to happen. And then later we pull out food and we say, hey, go up to that person, go say hi to them. And the dog goes, no, no, no. Sometimes when food comes out, I'm scared. Rather than the dog have success taking food from our hand, the dog learns, hey, sometimes I don't take food from the hand because I'm scared. So anytime you see fear, give the dog food and assess, is this dog scared? Will they take food? If they're taking food, it might be possible they could meet this person. It could be possible they can, maybe even if they don't get pet by the person, hang out with the person and have success, okay? So we've talked about holding the dog's collar. We talked about holding the harness, holding the leash back like this when the dog's lunging, how that can make the dog more convinced that they're supposed to lunge, okay? We talked about not using food when the dog's scared as a litmus test to kind of see, hey, how overwhelmed is this dog? How scared is the dog? How freaked out is the dog? If they're taking food from me, they're probably not that freaked out. And if they're not taking food, it may not be the best idea to try to introduce them to somebody right now. The final thing I want to talk about is going to be surprising to you, and that is that people tend to look, talk, and touch the dog when the dog is doing this reactive behavior. So typically the dog starts whining, staring at something. Like, let's say the dog wants this piece of food here, and then I start petting her when she's looking at it. And you can see, like, it makes her think it's totally fine to be looking at that thing. So your dog's looking at something, they're not sure about it, you start petting them, you start telling them it's okay, you say their name a bunch. Pretty soon they start associating your touch with them staring at things. They start associating the sound of your voice with them staring at things. And we see this time and time again. A dog will be in here, they'll be completely fine. The owner starts petting the dog. I don't think she'll do it right now. Oh yeah, she will. And you see, she starts looking around. Man, maybe there's something over there. So be very mindful of looking, talking, touching the dog when they're in a state of hyperarousal, when they're not focused, and when they're doing the wrong behavior, staring, lunging, crying, whining. The risk is high that the dog will associate those behaviors with you being next to them, with you touching them, talking them, looking at them, and also perhaps if there's insecurity or feelings of aggressiveness or fear, they will associate those feelings with being next to you, which we don't want. I said that was the final thing I was going to mention, but I'm actually going to mention one more thing because I do think this is important, and I would be leaving an important thing out by not mentioning it, okay? You see this dog has the prong collar on, okay? The prong collar is a great training collar, okay? Yes, we're going to use food to tell the dog don't be scared. Yes, we're not going to pet the dog because we don't want them thinking we think that what they're doing is a good idea. But it's so important. We get the prong collar on the dog, a slip lead on the dog, or a halty, or Heather's Hero sidekick leash that goes around the dog's snout. We use some sort of training tool where we can physically control the dog effectively and stop the dog. That way I can tell the dog, like let's say this was the person, no, good job. Okay, so with the prong collar I can tell the dog, hey, don't get that. Come over here, get this. But look at the difference when I put the harness on, guys. Same exercise. So, you know, the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about is the harnesses, guys. Your harness is not going to physically stop the dog. It's not going to create the behavior of the dog turning to you. It's going to make the dog more likely to keep pulling forward because of the way the pressure is pulling them. Okay, your prong collar or your slip lead or your halty is going to encourage the dog, like you'll see right here, to turn over to me and come this way. And that way we can start to tell the dog, hey, when you feel the leash pulling you back towards me, do not keep going forward. When you lunge and this leash tightens on you, don't lunge again. That was not comfortable. And if we train the dog in training commands like this, sit, good. Let's go. Yes. Sit. Good. We're not only going to be able to tell them with the prong collar, you cannot do this, you must not do this, you're not allowed to do this, but we're also going to be able to tell them with the prong collar, here's what you are supposed to do, here's the right thing to do. And because we've used a lot of rewards, the dog is going to be very clear in understanding clearly this is the right thing to do. So if we say, hey, stop lunging at the dog, and then we go, hey, come on, let's go. Good. 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 The dog's like, I know what let's go means, and I know what stop means. So, just to reiterate, folks, be mindful of your looking, your talking, your touching to the dog when they're reactive, when they're over-adrenalized, when they're out of their mind, okay? Try to avoid that. Do pull out food and use food when your dog is scared or overwhelmed to assess. Are they in a space where we can train right now? Even right here, you can see she's not as interested in the food. So I might lend myself to think, hey, she's not really that interested in food. This probably isn't the time I'm going to go take her to meet somebody new. Because if she's not even sure she wants the food from my hand, she might not take the food from somebody new. Okay? Avoid the temptation to pull back on the harness, pull back on the collar, and try to restrain the dog physically when they're being reactive. More likely, you're going to make them just try harder. And last but not least, folks, get a prong collar, a slip lead, or a halty on the dog so you can, while giving them food and saying this is the right thing, you can start stopping them and telling them you cannot do this. It's not possible. I don't like it. It's bad. And also you can tell them effectively, even when they're distracted, sit. Good. And the dog will sit down. Remember, as always, folks, we don't blame them. We train them. And if you bring me a nice dog like Emmy here, and you say she's got reactivity, I'm going to be really happy because Emmy's a real nice dog, and with training, we're going to be able to get her to the point that she should be at this point in her life where she's making friends, being social, living her best life. Oh, good girl. When I pet the dog, in this case, we just finished an amazing training session. So when I'm petting her here, I'm telling her, we just did a great job. You paid attention to me, you listened. And I know she's going to feel very calm right now, very proud of herself, and very confident knowing, hey, I'm getting pet by this guy. I just did a good training session. Man, that was awesome. Until next time, folks, we'll see you then.